Hey there, welcome to your weekly astrology forecast for September 16th. So, this week is all about working with illusion and imagination. This week we have Mercury aspecting Saturn. We also have Jupiter aspecting Neptune, which is a bit of a rare transit. And then we also have a last quarter moon in the sign of Gemini. So as always, I'm excited to share the astrology of this week with you, and I have 3 tips for you to make the most out of this week. But before we jump into the transits, let's talk about the moon, what's going on with the moon this week to get the emotional tone of the week. So that last quarter moon, I'll talk more about that in a moment, but that is happening on Saturday, just so you know. So the full of this week, we're in the waning phase of the lunar cycle. So this means that the moon is appearing smaller and smaller in the sky. What does that mean? That is a symbolic reflection for going within, for internalizing, for pruning things back from your life, starting to simplify. So we start off the week Monday with the moon in Aries. So moon in Aries is more active, dynamic, passionate. There's a desire to do things very quickly, to do things that need to be started, that need to be initiated. It's about action. Then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the moon is in the sign of Taurus. And so the moon is said to be very auspicious in Taurus. I would say this week, because it is the waning phase, I would look at things that need to get done, where if there's something that you need to elaborate on, how can you just determine what you want to focus your energy on versus what is not a good use of your time. That's really good for when the moon is in Taurus, because Taurus is about digging into things and elaborating on things. Getting down to practicality. And then Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, the moon is in the sign of Gemini, so it changes signs on Thursday. So we're leading up to this last quarter moon in Gemini because it's at the later degrees of Gemini. That being said, though, we get to feel the buildup the entire time that it's in the sign of Gemini. And so moon in Gemini typically is known to be very expressive. It's a good time for communication, of course, for sharing ideas, and for kind of like hopping from one thing to the other. Again, it's more of an active energy versus Taurus is more about stability. Moon in Gemini is more about I want to look at this, I want to look at that, I want to do that. So you might feel a little bit of that this week. And then Sunday, we cap off the week with the moon in Cancer. And so moon in Cancer is another place where the moon does well, where the moon is said to be auspicious because the moon is ruled by Cancer. And so moon in Cancer tends to be a time when it's good to get downtime, to seek comfort, and to surround yourself with situations that feed you emotionally. All right. So to jump into the transits, I have a quote that I want to share with you for this first aspect that we'll talk about, which is Mercury square Saturn. This is from Virginia Woolf, and she says, "Growing up is losing some illusions in order to acquire others." And I thought this was really perfect for Mercury Saturn. And you might be like, why, Shauna? We're talking about illusions. Saturn is reality, right? Yes. And reality can sometimes just be another illusion. Because the thing with Saturn is that Saturn symbolizes the structure of our lives. It symbolizes the rules that we need to play by. And the rules that seem to be or feel non-negotiable. So things like needing to work in order to make a living, or needing to have a home to live in, security needs, physical needs, etc. Those are all Saturn things. So we need all of those things, but at the same time, sometimes we have a lot more power. Oftentimes we have a lot more power than we think that we do. And the thing with Saturn is Saturn shows how we look at the structure of our lives and how our lives should be. And it can happen sometimes where if you are following the way things should be according to principles outside of yourself that maybe you've learned from your family of origin or from your culture, and maybe that doesn't jive with your own internal values, then it can create this illusion of reality. So I hope that makes sense. An example is, let's say you end up pursuing a career that, like I did, that you thought was that you were supposed to do, that was respectable, and it's something that was valued by your family or your friends, and it doesn't necessarily do it for you in your heart, but you're like, all right, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. The illusion of Saturn is that you have to stay in that career. So that's just one example. I hope that makes sense. So what does that mean when Mercury is square Saturn right now? Mercury is our conscious mind, our thought process. It's also communication. And so when Mercury squares Saturn, there is a confrontation of boundaries, of reality, and this can be challenging when it's a square aspect. It can look like also just having really difficult conversations, having to lay everything out on the table, or having to confront a reality that is not entirely pleasant. It can also be confronting a reality and something that is really empowering and being like, okay, yeah, like I'm going to take control and I'm going to put myself in the power seat in this position. Let's see, what else do I want to say about that? It can also be just simply a more serious tone of thinking. It can be a time to really manage your time, to manage your thoughts even, because we are talking about Mercury. So the thing that I really want to leave you with this transit as well is that when Mercury-Saturn happens, there can sometimes be a feeling of perceived victimization or perceived helplessness, because Saturn is like, hey, there's this reality that you need to deal with, and it can often symbolize where there are situations that we need to take responsibility. And so I want you to know that you actually have more power than you think that you do. And I think that we're in a position to do well here because Saturn is in a place of power in the sign that it rules, which is Capricorn. Another note, Saturn also stations direct this week as well. I don't talk about the outer planet stations because they tend to be retrograde for at least half of the year. So it's not as, I guess, special, I would say, as like a Mercury retrograde, Venus or Mars, etc., because it defines so much of that planet's path. But it is worthy of note. So I would wonder, what are you thinking about this week? Where are you confronted with situations where you need to take responsibility, or where someone is asking you to take responsibility, and how do you feel about that? All right, the second aspect is very different energy, very different feeling, is Jupiter square Neptune. And so the quote that I chose for this is by Maria Montessori, creator of Montessori schools. She says, "Imagination does not become great until human beings, given the courage and the strength, use it to create." And I thought this was perfect for Jupiter-Neptune because Jupiter-Neptune combo is all about imagination and dreams and fantasy. It can also be about illusion and delusion and like not really seeing things clearly, seeing things with rosy colored glasses, or like wanting so bad to see something happen that's beautiful that that becomes sort of like a grandiose fantasy. Jupiter can be grandiose things as well. So I think it's a beautiful time to tap into this energy, to tap into dreaming about what is possible. And in a way, the Mercury-Saturn has the grounding to balance this out too, to allow us to dream and visualize and sort of get lost in the beauty of things. But then to bring that back into, okay, I can still be grounded in my life and in this physical body. And then the last thing that's happening this week is the last quarter moon in the sign of Gemini. So this is happening Saturday the 21st at 7:41 p.m. Pacific time. It's at 29 degrees of Gemini, so the very last degree of the sign. The quote that I chose for this aspect is by Patricia Highsmith. She says, "My imagination functions much better when I don't have to speak to people." And so I thought that was really perfect for the feeling of this week, and then kind of ironic for the last quarter moon in Gemini, because moon in Gemini is known to be a great time for communication and for sharing ideas. But we do have this kind of like more meditative tone this week with the Jupiter Neptune. There's definitely this vibe of like being able to go into meditative states or imaginative states more easily than normal. And with the moon being in the last quarter point, it is sort of about like preparing yourself to go into more meditative, more inward kind of states. And I don't know about you, but I also find that my creativity is really heightened when I don't have to project myself outward, when I don't have to like talk to people or explain myself, or as an introvert, it sometimes takes more energy to be around other people and to communicate. So I thought that was really perfect for this, and I would take this last quarter moon as really discerning how it is that you communicate. So how much energy do you spend when you're in one situation versus another? And maybe there are some situations where you do talk to people and you feel energized versus others. It takes a little bit more energy and then you need to replenish afterwards. So I would really pay attention to that this week, especially because we are sensitized a bit with the Jupiter Neptune. All right, so I'm going to pull a card. The one last transit that I didn't mention a whole lot, or at all really, was Mars is trine Pluto this week also. And so this is a more subtle aspect because it is a trine. But I think this also lends itself to the vibe around stepping into your sense of power and authority. So that is there for you as a resource. And I would definitely, notice where you feel, where and when you feel powerful, when you feel a lack of control and power, and how can you find this balance between surrendering to what is, and then saying at the same time, but I'm also going to take responsibility for myself and for my life, and I'm going to do what needs to be done. All right, so I will pull 3 cards. These can be sort of a story for the week. When I do 3 card pulls, I do like to have it be sort of like a beginning, middle, and end, or past, present, and projected future. Or you can just pick a number between 1 and 3. And then that one card will be your card. And so you can take a moment to close your eyes and relax. All right. So I'll say too, I don't pull these cards as like a what's going to happen. I pull these cards. Tarot is a symbolic tool. Our minds work symbolically, our unconscious works symbolically. And so as we're pulling these up, of course, there's certain symbols associated with each card, especially in the Rider-Waite or whatever system you're using, whatever style of tarot you're using. So there's that meaning, but there's also the meaning that kind of like pops out at you, or the action that you see in this card. So I just want to, note that I want you to be paying attention this week, but every week when I pull a card, what is it that like it reminds you of? What does it speak? What is it saying to you? All right, so I pulled the Four of Wands for card number 1. These are all upright. The King of Cups for card number 2. And then 3 is the King of Wands. 2 kings. All right, so I do think it's interesting that there's 2 kings, and then the Four of Wands is about celebration and like parties to a certain extent even, but also like stability and security as well. So Wands, of course, is sort of like a fire kind of energy. 4 is stability, security, and this card is like there's something that is worthy of celebration, either that maybe that's in your life now or that you want to celebrate, or this might be an encouragement for you to celebrate something that's going well in your life. In the image of the card, it's said to be like a wedding ceremony. There's 2 people here. They have little bouquets, and there's this beautiful little garland on the wands and people celebrating in the background. So I wonder how that resonates with you. Do you see something else in this card, or how does the theme of celebration and enjoyment land with you? The King of Cups is a really sweet card. So the kings symbolize like as with the queens, a leadership kind of vibe. And this is more of a masculine kind of tone. Masculine in that it's more of like a yang energy. It's more direct and focused. It's more about purpose and direction, versus the queens are kind of more about holding a space and this like creative spiral kind of flow. Cups is about, King of Cups especially, is about emotional intelligence. It's about having a sense of warmth with leadership at the same time, and a sense of kind of like emotional authority. And I would say also the King of Cups reminds me of the counselor, or someone who is able to give wisdom and advice in a very caring way. So this can, again, symbolize maybe a literal person, or it can just be an energy that's encouraged for you to embrace, to be that warm, that you can be warm and conscious and empathetic, but also, have a sense of pride and leadership as well. So King of Wands, similar vibe of authority. There's a lot of passion here at the same time. So this is more about leadership of people, and leaning more into that authoritative kind of like authority in a positive way. Like, I think also like leading management of resources very well, or management of people very well. And I would say also to managing your energy well is a good theme for the King of Wands. So I would take this back. So I would look at all of these together as there's something in your life that's maybe worth celebrating. And maybe that is what's going on with the Mercury Saturn too, is maybe it's an encouragement to say, hey, there is a lot that you have here. There's a lot that you have to offer. There's a lot of goodness in your life that is worthy of embracing. And the two kings, I would say, is really, how can you take further authority in your life? How can you become more of a leader in your life? I'm curious how that lands with you. What does that mean to you? All right, that's your horoscope for this week. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you did, please share it with a friend who you think would enjoy it as well. And you can still get my free 4-part video series about boundaries with heart for empaths. You can find that at neofemininastrology.com. And thank you again to all of you who have left comments or sent me emails and said how much you enjoy it. I always love hearing your feedback and how you incorporate things into your life specifically as well. So wishing you a wonderful week, and I will talk to you soon. Namaste.